the method of tafsir, I know that you guys back to Tafsir Ibn Kathir, which is a great resource. I personally like using Tafsir Ibn Kathir along with Tafsir al-Qurtubi, al-Jami' for al-Qurtubi, and of course with Tanwir for the great Tunisian scholar, Tahir ibn Ashur. But inshallah, I actually like using right there in where you could actually see the page and pretty much live within the page. This is what I enjoy about tafsir, is that I want you to actually see the ayat and really connect the ayat with each other and get an understanding of what is really not only what is being said, but how is this ayah actually related to the following ayah or the ayah that is before it. In other words, to see that coherence within the Quran is extremely important. And of course, to also to derive different lessons that we can learn from those ayat. All right, so you guys left off at ayah number 11. Let's just go back, because whenever we actually start with an ayah, we always have to connect it with the previous ayat. So Surah Nur, we know that it actually covers a number of different topics, but there is a great focus on the part of the preservation of al-ird, or the preservation of chastity. And of course, when we want to speak about the preservation of chastity, we also have to speak about not what you should do in order to preserve your chastity, but let's say the consequence of those that don't actually follow the method of preservation, the chastity preservation, on what the consequence is going to be. So in the beginning, it basically talked about the consequence of those that were actually not married, and that they would actually get 100 flogs in terms of corporal punishment for committing zina, for committing any type of fornication. Of course, this is talking about those that are not married. It goes in detail to speak about the 100 lashes that they would be getting. And of course, here, this was actually talking about the non-virgin, in other words, the virgin ones and the non-virgins. The virgins actually are out of this generalization through the hadith, and we know that this generalization as an usul, this generalization can actually particularize. So the hadith did actually particularize the married ones that committed zina with actually the stoning penalty. And we did actually cover a number of different times in terms of the corporal punishment in Islam, and is that humane or is that not humane? So that's a different story. I'd be happy to talk about it today if you are interested. Anyhow, so the part is that it talked about also why is that the case, and of course the most important thing is basically because when we're speaking about zina, it's basically going to be transgressing that particular transgressions, that the child, and also the limit of modesty and the limit of the preservation of family within the community. And then it goes further to actually talk about those that actually would accuse others of committing such a thing without having any evidence, without having any witnesses to actually witness that they had seen these people commit such an act. And we said that they needed to get 4 different witnesses. And then it continues when it talks about the part about accusing others of committing zina. Then what if the situation, the scenario that it moves on is, what scenario was a husband actually witnessing on his wife, or the wife's witnessing on her husband that he's committing zina? So in that situation, what happens? And we said that this was actually called the li'an right there, and they would do a different type of let's call it, in terms of putting forward the evidences and making the different oaths. Now, this actually brings in the story of Hadithat al-Ifk. Let me just So this actually brings in hadithat al-ifk, a very important situation, a very important transgression happened on the Prophet ﷺ, and we're just going to go into these ayat. This is the only area or the only part, the only excerpts in the Quran that actually speak about ifk. What is it? So al-ifk basically means a major blasphemy. It's a major blasphemy, a major lie, a major transgression that actually happened against the family of the Prophet ﷺ and none other but Sayyidah Aysha herself. What is the story? So the story is the Prophet ﷺ, along with, of course, a huge army, they were actually going for a mission, an army, basically going for a battle, or at least not necessarily an army, but in other words, let's just call it a military mission. And in the middle of the way, Sayyidah Aisha needs to get off her this little hodash, this little, kind of like a caravan, and where she's sitting on top of the camel. And she basically also loses her own necklace. Whether she was picking up the beads or whether she basically lost them, in the end is that she gets off that camel and goes to do her business and also search for her necklace. They would think that she's on there, but she was not actually on there. The whole caravan, the whole army completes its journey, and Sayyidah Aisha is left behind. Sayyidah Aisha already knows that there is someone that always comes after the whole team has walked, that there's someone else that always is left behind on purpose to make sure that no one else is actually left behind. Now, the person that was always to be at the end was always Safwan ibn al-Mu'attal. Safwan ibn al-Mu'attal had a sleeping disorder. The sleeping disorder that Safwan ibn al-Mu'attal had was the main reason why the Prophet would actually keep him the person to always be coming late. Because of his sleeping disorder, he would not be capable of waking up early, so he left him with his sleeping problem so we could use it differently. You continue your sleep, but once you wake up, we want you to follow us and just make sure we had not left anyone behind, because to leave someone behind actually means they could be dying in the desert. So here, basically, Safwan ibn Mu'attal comes over and finds Sayyidah Aisha, which he had actually recognized because Sayyidah Aisha herself was actually married to the Prophet ﷺ from the early times of the migration to Medina. In other words, he had seen her before even the hijab was an obligatory. And that's where Safwan ibn Mu'attal recognizes her. After recognizing her, he basically does what is called الترجيع and الحوقلة. So inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un and la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. She wakes up from hearing that, and then he basically gets her the camel to ride on, and off they go and basically come to Medina. The ones to see that she was with Safwan ibn Mu'attal were really a number of different people in Medina, but no one was actually concerned until the munafiqeen had actually brought it up. The munafiqeen, the hypocrites, had actually brought it up that this was nothing but a sign of some kind of an earlier relationship, or at least an behavior. And that, okay. So that actually brings up this rumor that goes viral within the Medina. So this is basically the story of Hadith al-Ifk. So let's continue with that and actually see how the ayat talked about it and what the lessons that we should be learning from it are. So let's see. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ جَاءُوا بِالْإِفْكِ عُصْبَةٌ مِّنكُمْ. So those that have with major blasphemy. So ifk itself is actually a major blasphemy. Usbatum minkum. It's a group of people from amongst you. So what does that mean? When you actually look at the word minkum, it tells that they were actually part of the Muslim community. In other words, the Muslim community itself was actually involved in what is actually against the, call it the benefit, and against the interest of the Prophet ﷺ. Even the Muslim Ummah was actually involved in that. لا تحسبوه شرا لكم. Don't think that it was necessarily all evil for you. As a matter of fact, it was actually good for you. What was actually good for the Ummah when it was actually a major lie, which a major blasphemy? How can at all there be any good? Now that's a lot for us to learn, is that what you might actually think is an evil thing to you might actually carry within it some things that are good. You may not recognize the height, you may not recognize the wisdom behind it, but you just have to wait in there, hold on in there, and don't rush the consequences and rush the results. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا تحسبوه شرا لكم. Don't think that was necessarily containing nothing but absolute evil, but it is in fact something that is actually containing something good. So what was actually the good in it? The good in it was really to bring about clarity to the community by bringing in, let's call it shedding the light on those that were actually causing the disunity within the ummah. So we would say that you would not be capable of knowing your group of people, you not be capable of on who is actually on your side, unless you actually were capable of distinguishing who's actually on the other side. Now that's a lesson to learn, because when you look at Surah At-Tawbah, for example, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually said in Surah At-Tawbah, he mentioned in Surah At-Tawbah that they're munafiqeen. Remember, think of this. You've got the Battle of Tabuk. In the Battle of Tabuk, we had 30,000 troops, 30,000 Muslim troops. And on the other side, the Byzantine Empire was actually already an army, and already we're talking about the Byzantine Empire, where they were already gathering in 40,000 troops. Now, in the middle of the way, a dispute actually happens over who's going to be getting water from the well. And the munafiqeen right there actually, and want to use that moment to create more division. So the head of the munafiqeen, Abdullah ibn Ubay, he basically said, this is all because of the immigrants, referring to the Prophet ﷺ and referring to the muhajirin. They are the ones that are actually causing all the problem. Now, this was actually about to be a major dispute, but then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was letting the Muslim Ummah recognize those that are actually causing dispute, those that are causing a division. And that's why they basically took a whole army that is 1/3 of the army to actually go back to Medina. And the Muslims are left with 20,000 go to meet at the whole army of 40,000. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually mentioned in that ayah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not only the people that didn't come, that were staying in Medina, but also the people that stayed and went back to Medina, and instead of joining with the Muslims in Tabuk. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that he was the one that actually thabbatahum. He made them feel the laziness to actually join. وَقِيلَ قُعُودُوا مَعَ الْقَاعِدِينَ. And they were told, sit with those that were sitting. Now this, in order to connect it with that, لا تحسبوه شر لكم. Don't think that it's necessarily absolute evil, but it's actually containing some good, in where it's scrutinizing which people are actually causing the disruption, which group of people are actually causing the disunity within the ummah. لكل امرئ منهم ما اكتسب من الإثم. Every single person. Now, I want to look at this ayah right there, because it's basically going to be putting two sides. two sides of different people who actually engaged in even this major blasphemy, in this whole evil talk. So he said, لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ, every single person with whatever that they had actually committed, an amount of a sin that will actually be held accountable for. وَالَّذِي تَوَلَّى كِبَرَهُ مِنْهُمْ لَهُ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ. And the one to actually live in arrogance, in other words, by rejecting the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, basically going to be getting a great or a magnificent or an awful tournament. So here the painful punishment is going to be for those that would actually be arrogant. So to this one, because this is extremely important, because we need to لكل امرئ منهم ما اكتسب من الإثم. So this ayah right there, let's put it in brackets, is basically the ayah where now it's giving me the details. So here we go, group number one. It's group number one. So this ayah on top right there is basically saying, well, each and every single one is going to be responsible for a different kind of an ithm, a different kind of a sin, even though they practically did the same thing, but each one was actually getting a different punishment or a different responsibility, but they were practically doing the same thing. And this is extremely important to learn, that you can actually have people doing the exact same transgression, the exact same sin, but actually get a different punishment for it. How's that? Let's just go further and actually read about it to understand. لولا إذ سمعتموه ظن المؤمنون والمؤمنات بأنفسهم خيرا. What they were supposed to be doing, إذ سمعتموه, when you had heard it, the believers and the believing men and the believing women, they would actually deal with the matter with a golden rule. And what did they do? Well, they said, they were supposed to say, هذا إفك مبين. This is a great blasphemy. What was the story in here? So this is group number one. Let's just put number one right there. Group number one is basically referring to Abu Ayyub al-Ansari along with his wife. When they heard this rumor, Abu Ayyub al-Ansari tells his wife, he says, would you do such a thing? And she said, I would not do such a thing whatsoever. So Abu Ayyub said, well, I is even better than you. So we should think better than what is actually being said. This is nothing but a major blasphemy. So that actually puts us in that area in where, with the golden rule, would you want such a rumor to actually pass on to you? Would you want such talk to be said about you? And that's where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually called them believing men and believing women, because he included them to actually say al-mu'minun wal-mu'minat. So they knew that this was a blasphemy because they wouldn't do such a thing. And they knew that they were not actually on the level of Sayyidah Aysha. Now, what was supposed to be the evidence to prove whether something had happened or not? So the evidence in this ayah is basically saying, well, the evidence to prove whether such a thing did happen, they were actually supposed to be bringing in four witnesses to have actually witnessed the actual event taking place. Then if they were not capable of bringing four witnesses, then those are the people that are actually the liars. In other words, if some rumor is basically somehow spreading about someone's chastity, if they don't bring more witnesses, then clearly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was calling them nothing but liars. ولولا فضل الله عليكم ورحمته في الدنيا والآخرة لمسكم فيما أفضتم فيه عذاب عظيم. If it wasn't for the mercy of the Lord Almighty and also the blessings of the Lord Almighty, he would have actually made the mercy of the Lord Almighty in this dunya, in the mercy that is in dunya, in this life and the hereafter, then you would have actually been pricked for what you have actually went into, in other words, the blasphemy, rumors you had been engaged into, would have actually been the reason for the major pain or the major punishment that you would be falling in. Now, who was that talking about? We're going to zoom out a little bit in order to see who that was talking about. So the first one, let's see. So in this ayah, let's go and actually put number 1 and number 2. So in number 1 ayah, which is لولا إذ سمعتموه, number 1 ayah, that was for Abu Ayyub al-Ansari. Number 2 ayah was actually speaking about 3 main people. One person is Hassan ibn Thabit. Number 2 person is Hamna bint Jahsh. Number 3 person is Mistah ibn Athala or Ibn Athatha. What was actually the story between these 3 people? It wasn't, the story was not between them, but these people were amongst the believers. Hassan ibn Thabit was actually the poet for the Prophet ﷺ himself. Hamna bint Jahsh was actually Zainab bin Jahsh's sister, who was Zainab bint Jahsh. Zainab bint Jahsh was actually the Prophet ﷺ's wife. Zainab bint Jahsh did not actually engage in this blasphemy, but Hamna, her sister. And the other person was actually Mistah ibn Athatha. Mistah himself was actually one of the people that participated in the Battle of Badr. So let's put Mistah in the picture for just a bit. So Mistah engages in the story, and he too actually thinks the story is true and starts participating in spreading this rumor. Sayyidah Aysha didn't know anything about Mistah. So they used to go for al-marasa, so to use the restroom. They didn't have restrooms within their homes. They would go for al-marasa. It would be a farther area. It would be a low area, and those were those public restrooms, if you may. So Mistah ibn Athatha, his mom, was actually going with the Sayyidah Aysha. So they were going there, and then it seems like that his mom dropped something, or she was getting a bucket of water. It just falls, and then she says, "Ta'isa Mistah. May Mistah live in sorrow." Sayyidah Aysha was surprised as to why would she say such a thing. And she said, "Would you actually make a dua, an invocation against someone that was actually present for Badr?" And she said, "Didn't hear what he was actually saying about you." And she was like, "Saying what? What are you talking about?" And she said, "Well, this is the rumor that's actually spreading about you, that you were out going with this man, Safwan ibn al-Mu'attal, and that you are somehow in a relationship with him." Sayyidah Aysha had no idea. All she was recognizing is a cold shoulder from the Prophet ﷺ, but she never understood why. It isn't until Mistah tells her why she was actually invoking against her own son. So Sayyidah Aysha goes back, and after saying, "They will actually say such a thing about me." Now, mind you, Sayyidah Aysha was only at the time approximately, give or take, 15 years old, a young girl. So she goes back to the Prophet ﷺ and asks for the permission to go back to her family. She goes back to her family and she says, "All I wanted to do was really make sure that this room is true." In other words, true, not whether they are right or not, but basically whether the rumor does actually have any basis to it. So she goes back to her family, and they were telling her that, yes, they're spreading these kinds of rumors. All right. Now, the other person Hamna bint Jahsh basically got involved in this whole rumor because she wanted to support her sister Zainab. Okay, now right at point, Sayyida Aisha goes back and asks for permission to get her friends to cry with her. So she continues to cry all night long, and she's just crying and crying. Ali ibn Abi Talib, when the Prophet ﷺ was asking, or was being asked by the Prophet ﷺ, what does he think? Ali ibn Abi Talib said, why don't you go ask the women? In other words, the women would know each other better. Don't ask the guys because they don't know. The women would know each other better. So he suggested that he would ask Barira. So who's Barira? Barira is basically the slave for Sayyida Aisha at the time. She was later freed. And Barira, she says, well, I only know good about Sayyida Aisha. I never saw anything wrong. The only wrong thing that she would do is basically when I would ask her to mend the dough, basically, and knead the dough and just watch over the dough, the sheep would actually come, eat the dough, and she's still asleep. That was the only thing. I mean, mind you, she's only 14, 15, so, a teenager at the time, but she wasn't taking care of the responsibility like an older adult, at least in that sense. But that doesn't necessarily mean that she was going to engage in the blasphemy or in the rumors that she was accused of. So here, this ayah was actually talking about وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ وَرَحْمَتُهُ فِي الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ. If it wasn't for the blessings and the mercy of the Lord Almighty in this dunya and the hereafter, the Lord Almighty would have actually made a major punishment because of all that they were engaged in actually happened to them. Why? So this is this right ayah right there. إِذْ تَلَقَوْنَهُ بِأَلْسِنَتِكُمْ. Here we go, a semicolon, in where it's basically telling us, so why would that happen? إِذْ تَلَقَوْنَهُ بِأَلْسِنَتِكُمْ. It's because تَلَقَوْنَهُ. Now the word تَلَقَوْنَهُ actually means it's like they were catching it in their tongues. وَتَقُولُونَ بِأَفْوَاهِكُمْ. So you would basically catch it with your tongues. It's kind of like a fish, and where it grabs it with the tongue and then it passes it on and so forth, and not necessarily process the idea. And you would say with your tongue, you actually have no knowledge of. But the most important part, وَتَحْسَبُونَهُ هَيِّنًا. And you would think that it wasn't a big deal, that it wasn't a major deal to talk about. And this is extremely important because most times people would say things and they would say, well, I'm just talking, I'm just saying, what's up? Don't make it a big deal. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, وَتَحْسَبُونَهُ هَيِّنًا. You would actually think it's not a big deal. But in reality, the Prophet ﷺ actually said a hadith where he said that one may actually say something. تهوي به 70 خريفا. They may say something, لا يلقي لهبا, and not even considerate of any major issue, but that wording that they might actually say might actually take them deep down in hellfire, 70 خريفا, 70 autumns, such as, in other words, it's basically, i.e., 70 years. So what they were saying is basically عند الله عظيم. Why is it عند الله عظيم? It's putting in an accusation that is based on blasphemy and putting someone's chastity at risk right there, that they're actually, when they're actually innocent of all of that. ولو سمعتموه قلتم ما يكون لنا أن نتكلم بهذا سبحانك هذا بهتان عظيم. The reaction it was supposed to be, when you have heard this blasphemy, you should actually said, how could we talk of something that we're not witnesses to, or how can we speak of something that we don't have any knowledge to? Subhanak, all the praise and all the magnificence goes to the Lord Almighty. And they should have actually said on the spot that this is a major blasphemy, since they don't have any evidence for. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala right there says, يَذُوكُمْ أَن تَعُودُوا لِمِثْلِهِ أَبَدًا إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. It's going to give you this wa'adh. What is al-wa'adh? Al-wa'adh is basically a nice reminder. He's given you a nice reminder that you would not go back to such a behavior and accuse others of committing such actions if you are really part of the believers. وَيُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ لَكُمُ الْآيَاتِ. And the Lord Almighty would clarify the signs for you, and your Lord Almighty is all-knowing and all-wise. I want you to look at a number of different things here, because I'm going to zoom out a little bit so we can actually see the ayah even more. So here we go. We're going to connect those ayat together. Let's see. So here, وَيُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ لَكُمُ الْآيَاتِ وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ حَكِيمٌ. When you look at the word alim, alim means all-knowing. Hakim means most wise. So what is that related? Every single name that you see, you have to relate it to the ones before it. So Ali, in where he is alim bi ahwal an-nas, he is all-knowing with what people actually go through. Hakim, in where he is most wise in regarding the consequence of the different matters. In other words, before they even take place. So therefore, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala right there, let's look at this ayah right there and actually go up a little bit, in where the Lord Almighty right there had actually said that ولولا فضل عليكم ورحمته في الدنيا والآخرة لمسكم فيما أفضتم فيه عذاب عظيم. So here we go. In the word Hakim, it basically takes us back to this wording right there, in where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yes, his mercy and his bounty was actually giving, somewhat of an exception, in where, because they had actually engaged, those are Hamna bint Jahsh, Hassan ibn Thabit, and Mustah ibn Athatha, because they engaged in this blasphemy, they were actually flogged 80 lashes for engaging in what is actually called al-qadhf. What is al-qadhf? Al-qadhf is accusing any decent man or woman of committing adultery or fornication without having 4 witnesses actually witnessing that. So they were actually flogged 80 lashes or 80 flogs for speaking about a Sayyidah Aysha. Those 3 from the mu'mineen. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يُحِبُّونَ أَن تَشِيعَ الْفَاحِشَةُ. So here, sorry, let's go back to the word Hakim. So Al-Hakim, because the Lord Almighty had actually, right there, was the one to let this rumor take place and let the Muslims recognize those that were actually engaged in the evil talk. And he was also Hakim in what he had actually regarded as the consequence or the punishment for engaging in such talk. All right. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يُحِبُّونَ أَن تَشِيعَ الْفَاحِشَةُ فِي الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Now, on the other hand, so Robert, let's zoom out a little bit more, because we actually said that this was actually involving 3 people. Let's look at the first group. The first group is this group. Number 1, Abu Ayyub al-Ansari. The second group is basically Hamna bint Jahsh, Hassan ibn Thabit, Mustah ibn Athatha. The third group is this group, which are al-Munafiqeen. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يُحِبُّونَ أَن تَشِيعَ الْفَاحِشَةُ فِي الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. Those that love spreading immorality amongst the believers will actually get a great or a painful punishment on Judgment Day, or even في الدنيا والآخرة, in this life and even in the hereafter. So what happened? Let's go back right there. So these people, even though they committed the same action as these people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not actually say for group number 2 that they were getting a major painful punishment on Judgment Day. So what were they getting? All right, they were actually getting in dunya, and they were getting the punishment in dunya, but in the akhirah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just said, well, you just think that it's not a big deal, but it is actually a big deal. وَهُوَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ عَظِيمٌ. What you were supposed to be saying was that at the end of the day, هذا بهتان عظيم. يعظكم أن تعودوا لمثله أبدا كنتم مؤمنين. So that was group number 2. Group number 3, on the other hand, were already the munafiqeen. Why were they actually getting a bigger, let's call it a threat? Well, that's because they were actually seeking something even more dangerous. They were actually seeking to spread al-fahisha. It's exactly what today these different things of the LGBT and all these different things that are actually right there spreading al-fahisha. What is al-fahisha?
عائشة
أيوة سام.
تعالي وريني حاجة بقى.
قصدك لفوق ولا لتحت؟
خلص لتحت.
أو give me ما أقدرش أطلع فوق، مش لابسة علي. أنا بحكي له شو المشكلة وخلاص. No. هلا. لا بحكي له. Give me a second, everyone. So when we actually look at the third group, إن الذين يحبون أن تشيع الفاحشة. What is الفاحشة? When we actually speak about criminal law in Islam, I want you to look at this really quick. DNAIM. I want you to look at that one. All right, DNAIM. This is my famous acronym. Always use it because it's extremely important. So in Islam, those are actually considered the legal maxims. So when you actually speak about any transgression in Islam, you're looking at these 5 categories. All right. So if we're speaking about, for example, somebody that is committing ridda, leaving Islam, then in that situation, that's going to be the capital punishment. Number 2 is if a person is actually killing someone else, that's also going to be the capital punishment, because we're looking at right there a transgression on one person's life is actually like transgression on all people. Number 3, there are actually differences of opinions on whether I comes first, which is chastity and family, or whether A comes first. So this is actually in that order. So the aql, the A stands for aql. So D stands for deen, N stands for nafs, A stands for aql, I stands for ird, M stands for mal. So in English, D stands for faith, N stands for nafs, life, A stands for aql, to mean mind, I stands for ird, which is chastity and family, M stands for mal, which is wealth and property. So if we're looking at a transgression on the faith itself, then that the capital punishment is going to be that basically the consequence. Same thing if we're talking about somebody's life is at stake, then if the person were to commit a crime and killing someone, the capital punishment is going to be basically the consequence. If somebody is actually drinking or doing drugs, then differences of opinions between scholars on whether it is 40 lashes or whether it's 80 lashes. But if we're talking about drugs, for example, being even more harmful than alcohol, the qadi or the leader might actually take what is actually called the ta'zir. So ta'zir, the qadi or the government would be the one to actually consider what punishment is to be within that. So now the I, on the other hand, it would actually be any transgression in terms of chastity. So if we're looking at somebody that is a virgin, never had a marriage experience before, all right, would actually get 100 lashes, whether it's a male or a female. Versus if it's someone with a marriage experience, not necessarily currently recently married or in a marriage relationship, but had a marriage experience before and they still have committed zina, then in that situation, whether it's a male or a female, they would actually get stoning. Is basically the consequence. Okay, so basically this would be the punishment, the stoning part. Forgot to mention here is the 100 lashes and taghribu am. In other words, they would have to leave the city that they're in for a year, or taghribu mi'a. There is another taghribu mi'a. All right, so the male, on the other hand, if someone were to transgress against people's property and wealth, where in stealing or at least in making what is called al-haraba. Stealing is different than al-haraba. If there is a transgression on people's property with mal, if this was done secretly, okay, so somebody goes into your house, basically robs your house and leave, okay, this would actually be stealing. That's where basically the right hand, start with the right hand, chopping from, or at least amputating the hand, and then as depending on that. Now, if the person were to do a public terror type of thing, so they would go into bank and start, hey, terrorizing everyone, we're going to kill you, give us your money or whatever it is, and everyone just puts their money down, that's actually called haraba. That's totally different in where the right arm and the left leg. So when we're looking at all of that, I know it's corporal punishment, but at the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that actually assigns where the limits of ethics are, and Islam considers that these are the limits of people's rights. The limits of people's rights are in their faith, in their life, in their mind, in their family, in the protection of family and chastity, and the protection of their property. So Islam considers that because these things are extremely important and that they're actually the foundation of social justice, if the person, despite all the different, let's call it discipline within the community in order to preserve these four people, actually makes social justice. If still the person managed to transgress the limit, instead of actually imprisoning them for years and years, we will just basically take out some of their freedom, or at least maybe entirely, depending on the level of transgression. And in that situation, we would basically do a corporal punishment instead of actually just imprisoning them and letting the government be responsible for all their stay throughout the time, because it basically takes away even from the government's wealth and so forth. So that's where that actually comes in where the word yuhibbuna an tashia al-fahisha in general, the word al-fahisha just means illicit behavior. All right, but in most of the ayat in the Quran, al-fahisha is actually referring to this category, al-ird, right? The transgression on al-ird. So when you look at is-su' wal-fahsha, it's basically referring to al-ird. So there are those that want to spread and want to make al-fahisha become something that is predominant, something that is practiced by the majority. In other words, whether it's using the media, or whether it's using words, or whether it's using different forms in order to spread al-fahisha. فِي الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. Those are the people that want to use any form of spreading al-fahisha. They would be given, or at least be punished with a painful punishment. Where? في الدنيا والآخرة. Now this actually brings in, since it's في الدنيا, this actually brings in في الدنيا a punishment in this dunya. So that's where the qadi, I want you to look at this one again, that's where the qadi might actually assign what is called the hudud, what is called the qasas is actually called the ta'zir. I want you to look at this one, because when you actually look at that, sorry, I'm a fiqh specialist, so with fiqh, you take me in there, I can only see the ayat right there actually containing fiqh. So that's like, okay, why would you go back to al-Qurtubi? All right, because I'm fiqh major, I have to. And these ayat are speaking to me in fiqh. All right, so here we go. Now, so it's okay, you guys, it's okay. We're cool, right? Are we good? Are we?
Absolutely.
You guys are. Okay, good. Now, when you actually look at لهم عذاب أليم, so what is the painful punishment here في الدنيا? So how could they get it في الدنيا? This is not talking about, yeah, they're just going to struggle in life. No, this is actually talking about a punishment. So you've got punishments are actually three types of punishments. The punishments part of the punishments are going to be called the hudud. What are the hudud? Hudud basically are certain limits. There is a had where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put a limit. If a fornication takes place, the had is going to be, if somebody is married, this much, and if somebody is not married, this much, etc. And of course, if someone is stealing, there's the had right there. But al-qasas is different. Al-qasas is going to be more for a transgression on a person's life. So it's a transgression on a person's life. The person, or at least their family, do have the right to take, instead of the capital punishment for the person, to actually take, instead of that, actually take a different punishment, and that or probably ask for the blood money, in other words, a compensation, let's call it a monetary compensation, instead of killing the actual person. All right. And finally, which is a ta'zir. Ta'zir, on the other hand, is different, because a ta'zir, that is actually left for the government to decide, of course, looking into, the type of let's call it transgression, or whatever felony they would commit. The qadi would be the one to actually assign a ta'zir. So the ta'zir might be in 14 different ways. Okay, the ta'zir would be maybe to do community service, maybe to clean the streets, maybe for probably saying bad words in the middle of the street. We're going to let them clean the streets, do community service. Or maybe if, we would say, well, he just had a bad word, he was just saying a bad word, these kind of words. So the qadi might say, well, yes, but this is becoming common. We need to make sure that we stop this lack of discipline. So we'll basically humiliate these people by making them clean the streets. We'll give them a certain vest, and we'll have them do this kind of work. Or a ta'zir could be, well, they're going to pay a fine. You probably, do this mistake, or probably if you're not wearing hijab, we're going to charge you $500, for example. All right. Ta'zir is not for transgressions that necessarily have one particular assigned punishment by the Quran or Sunnah. This is assigned by the qadi. This is assigned by the leader, all right, or by the government. Okay, so let's say they shave their beards. The qadi will say, we need people to actually discipline, follow the sunnah, and probably say, here's a ta'zir. Or maybe another qadi might say, well, anyways, it's a sunnah, we don't want to do ta'zir. We don't want to do that. Or let's say a common practice, I don't know, people are doing, different practices, and ta'zir would actually be involved. Okay, all right, so this is fid dunya. So the qadi might actually assign something fid dunya, but there are certain things that has nothing to do with the qadi, in where it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that side. It's hudud, okay? And or things that are qasas, there are different ways of what we deal with it. So when we're looking at these transgressions, it's not something that we necessarily assign, because with the assigning of the transgression, that's going to be ta'zir. All right, so that's not for us to decide. It's basically for the sharia. But for the ta'zir, no, it's left for the qadi or the government to assign what do they want it for. Could it be for crossing a red light or passing a red light? It could be a ta'zir. Wal akhirah. Okay, so في الدنيا والآخرة, that they basically will get a severe painful punishment in dunya, which is in what we had explained, and in akhirah they will be getting the punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahu ya'lamu wa antum la ta'lamun. The Lord Almighty knows and you don't know. In other words, here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's the same thing when we're talking about the corporal punishment. Is that humane? Do we necessarily consider that as humane? Well, at the end of the day, is that the one to assign the levels of justice is the one to actually assign, what is humane in terms of crossing those limits. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one we turn to in order to tell us whether this is humane or not. And it's definitely not the liberal society, and definitely not any of those feminist societies or whatever societies it is. It's basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ وَرَحْمَتُهُ وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ رَءُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. So at the end, if it wasn't but for the bounties of the Lord Almighty and His mercy, and the Lord Almighty is Ra'ufun Rahim, is the one that is Ra'uf. The word Ra'uf actually means most affectionate. And He is Rahim. He is the one to actually give mercy. If it wasn't for that, then we would have actually seen the Lord Almighty give them a punishment for what they had engaged in. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تتبعوا خطوات الشيطان.
Sheikha, we are at the hour. Whenever you'd like to take the break, let us know.
So you want me to pause for a little bit, or how do you?
It's up to you. If you want, we can pause a little later. If we can squeeze just a 5-minute break at some point, whatever you decide, just let me know and we'll pause the recording, inshallah.
All right, inshallah. So, يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تتبعوا خطوات الشيطان. I want you to look again. يا أيها الذين آمنوا, telling the believers right there after telling us about some of what those that actually want to spread al-fahisha want to do. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns the believers, يا أيها الذين آمنوا, O you who believe, do not follow خطوات الشيطان. خطوات الشيطان, basically the steps of الشيطان. Now here's a very important thing. When we're looking at خطوات الشيطان, what are خطوات الشيطان? Let's go back for the DNAIM again, right? Because every single, let's go, hold on, let me just do, how do you do this? All right, here we go. Whiteboard. Let's go for the whiteboard and just look into this, okay? So what you actually see in where every single law in Islam actually goes back to this DNAIM. This is extremely important. All right, every single rule actually goes to it, back to it. So when you actually say خطوات الشيطان, you're basically speaking about any step in where to bring you into a delusion in your faith, or basically any step or any step that the shaitan might push you towards, maybe a major anger, or maybe any trespassing the limit to harm people's lives, or whether it is to speak about or even to engage in any form of a transgression in terms of mind health and the fitan and the misconceptions, or whether we're talking about a transgression on people's chastity and family, or even a transgression on people's wealth. So خطوات الشيطان, and when we're speaking about ethics, it actually goes back to all these steps right there. So خطوات الشيطان, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا تتبعوا خطوات الشيطان. So whether خطوات الشيطان involves a literal transgression, or whether it is basically a path. I usually explain it like this. I usually put it into like a coil, right? In order for you to actually go, let's go like that, and where, you know what, I'm going to put it right there. In order to go, we're going to make it like this, okay? So we've got different levels of iman and different levels of kufr. So you've got the kufr being right there, all right? And then you've got another, what leads to it is basically right there. You've got al-fisq, all right? All right, and then you've got right there Islam. So sorry, but it's kind of hard typing on that. All right, another level is Islam, so level of Islam. And you've got the level of Iman. So Iman is right there. I'll just put an E. You guys know what I'm talking about. And then you've got the level of Ihsan. In order to go from this level to this level, you don't actually go up like that. You have to jump. And that's why I say it's like a coil. You have to jump from here to here. In order to jump, you have to go against your own gravity, or else you can't jump. You got to go against your own gravity and literally fight your own gravity. And the gravity that you want to fight is really the path of shaitan. So لا تتبعوا خطوات الشيطان. Don't follow the path and the steps of shaitan, because the steps of shaitan actually take you down, not up. And it's really important to mention that the higher up you go into the path, the slippier it gets. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also tells you, فَتَزِلَّ قَدَمٌ بَعْدَ ثُبُوتِهَا. So be careful. You could be at the level of Iman, but guess what? The farther up you go up, it gets slippier. فَتَزِلَّ قَدَمٌ بَعْدَ ثُبُوتِهَا. Your legs, your feet are very firm on the step of Iman, on this high up ladder. Think of it as a ladder. This ladder is right there. You're up here. But then guess what? Even though you're here, but the steps are actually slippier, and it could be just a nadra. You might have actually logged online, went and saw something for just a couple seconds. Those couple seconds actually take you to the law of Islam. It was just a couple seconds. It took you down. And in order to go back up again, you're going to have to fight again your gravity in order to go up again. And it might actually take you months, years to go up to the same level that you were in. It depends on how strong you actually get in wiping out that contamination that took place. Same thing. When we're actually looking at the bottom, those are actually more firm on that level. They're very strong on the level of kufr. But to go up, they're going to have to fight a higher gravity. So the farther up they want to go, they basically have to fight a higher gravity. And that's why it's easier to go from the level of Iman to the level of Ihsan than actually go from the level of Islam to the level of Ihsan. Because the level of Iman and the level of Ihsan, the gravity is less. This person has become an expert in maintaining the level of Iman. So from the level of Iman to the level of Ihsan, they have become experts there really close up. But guess what? The road is slippier. They can easily step back down. So here, وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ. Don't follow the steps of shaitan. In order to go up, you're going to have to jump. To jump, you're going to have to go up against your own gravity. لا تتبعوا خطوات الشيطان. Don't follow the steps of shaitan. وَمَن يَتَّبِعْ خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ فَإِنَّهُ يَأْمُرُ بِالْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنكَرِ. If you follow the steps of shaitan will always order you for al-fahsha wal-munkar. But wait a minute, is al-fahsha wal-munkar different than the fahsha that was actually mentioned before? Let's look at this really quick. All right, we're going to look into this one. So the first one, al-fahisha. The second one is al-fahsha wal-munkar. Is this actually the same thing? Well, al-fahsha in general, or al-fahisha in general, is any transgression. Okay? Al-fahsha wal-munkar. What do they literally mean? So al-fahsha, al-fuhsh basically means any type of a behavior that relates to chastity. So, or even speaking of things that are supposed to be covered. So for example, the Prophet ﷺ actually said, لَيْسَ الْمُؤْمِنُ بِالطَّعَانِ وَلَا اللَّعَانِ وَلَا الْفَاحِشِ وَلَا الْبَذِيءِ. A believer is not, لَيْسَ الْمُؤْمِنُ بِالطَّعَانِ, does not actually commit the illicit talk basically of cursing others, وَلَا اللَّعَانِ, and damning things, وَلَا الْفَاحِشِ, and does not actually speak of fuhsh or al-badha'a. The difference between al-fuhsh is relating to speaking about private parts, al-Bada'a is speaking about things that are supposed to be covered and sharing it publicly. So al-Fuhsh would be, for example, somebody speaking about private things and speaking about maybe using words that basically speak about private parts and stuff like that. That's al-Fuhsh. Al-Badha'a is speaking about things that are supposed to be disgusting. It could be, instead of saying I went to the restroom, to actually literally say what you were doing in there. That's al-Badha'a. All right. Al-Fahsha wal-Munkar is actually relating to al-Fahsha is more relating to speaking about zina. So the Quran uses the word al-Fahsha wal-Munkar often, and it more refers to zina. ولولا فضل الله عليكم ورحمته ما زكى منكم من أحد أبدا ولكن الله يزكي من يشاء والله سميع عليم. What is that relating to? Let's look into it. So let's, right there, the semicolon right there. وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ وَرَحْمَتُهُ. So the Lord Almighty here tells us don't follow the steps of shaitan. And if you follow the steps of shaitan, how do you recognize it? You're recognizing from the outcomes of what that behavior is. You recognize it by looking that it's basically a path in words, a behavior, whether it's looking at, or whether it's hearing, or whether it's talking, or whether it's basically it going for, or whether it's typing something, or etc., in where it actually involves illicit behavior. So, al-fahsha wal-munkar khutuwat al-shaytan. How do I know those paths? What are you looking at? Are those things illicit or not? What are you listening to? Are those things illicit, or are they immoral or moral? The things that you are talking about, are they moral or immoral? Because what your brain processes in terms of speech, behavior, and environment, and the things that you listen to, all of that, basically, yes, your brain takes in that information, but it's your heart that actually processes that. And that's why scientists are actually telling us that the heart itself actually contains some even neurological cells and receptors. And that's why people, even if they were extremely sad or something like that, they might actually get a heart attack, because the different thoughts don't necessarily process in the brain alone, it also processes in the heart. And that's why this word actually comes in. وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ. If it wasn't for the blessings of the Lord Almighty and His mercy, none of you would have actually been in the process of tazkiyah. And you would have never been capable of practicing tazkiyah, heart purification. But the Lord Almighty purifies whom He wills. And the Lord Almighty is all-hearing and all-knowing. How did we get into the heart, and why did we actually get into the heart? What was that all about? Well, that's in order to tell us that this whole thing is all about tazkiyah. And we will see down the road that tazkiyah is the core. What is tazkiyah? Well, tazkiyah is basically heart purification. So the whole thing in where what you abstain from in terms of illicit behavior, and in terms of the steps of shaitan, these two things, if you basically live in it, you will lose the tazkiyah of your heart. Simple. Your heart will be so contaminated that it will embrace the paths of shaitan, the steps of shaitan. So what, in other words, let's do it the other way. Let's read the ayah the opposite way. In other words, let's read it from a different direction. So therefore, to recognize khutuwat al-shaitan, you recognize it from al-fahsha wal-munkar, you basically take those steps, you basically lose your heart purification. In other words, if you actually, on the other hand, the opposite way, the path to Allah Almighty is recognized by the path of dhikr. We're flipping it. We're flipping it. What are we doing? So خطوات الشيطان are recognized by الفحشاء والمنكر. The خطوات, the steps to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are recognized by dhikr. What is dhikr? Dhikr is in 4 or 5 different levels. There's the oral dhikr. Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa laqad yassarna al-Qur'ana lidhikri fahal min muddakir. It's what you say. Number 2, there's the visual dhikr. Visual dhikr, you're taking a moment to ponder in the great magnificence of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and recognizing the magnificence of the Lord Almighty. There's the behavioral dhikr. You're practicing a certain practice. You're basically in your behavior, you're trying to make it based on khutwat Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's the oral dhikr, what you're saying. And there's the behavioral dhikr. There's the visual dhikr. There's the audio. What are you listening to? So that's the dhikr. All right. Now we recognize these parts of dhikr. That actually takes you into the tazkiyah. All right. That takes you into the tazkiyah. So what does the opposite of tazkiyah actually mean? The opposite of tazkiyah is basically going to be the level of ma zakka minkum min ahad. It's basically going to be the level of contamination. It's basically going to be that their hearts would actually be filled with ran. What is ran? Ran, kalla bal rana ala qulubihim ma kanu yaksibun. So what is ran? Ran in Surah al-Mutaffifin. It's basically the heart is going to get rusted with what? With this black rust because of the behaviors. So al-fahsha wal-munkar, although a very generalized term to mean end of a transgression, but this is in order to understand how we actually get to that. Because if you don't recognize what wrong is, you won't be capable of recognizing what right is, because that's how you recognize the right and the wrong. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that khutwat al-shaytan will actually start affecting your heart. When you affect your heart, even while you're dying, your brain may not be processing the ideas, but your heart is still remembering, and your heart is basically what's going to affect. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يُزَكِّي مَن يَشَاءُ. The Lord Almighty purifies whomever He wills. So purifies, is it Allah that purifies, or is it that we purify? Who's the object here? So the object, it's basically 2. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you actually, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. You take the steps to do jihad of the nafs by cleansing your heart and staying away from the path of shaitan. جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. The word subul really means the exact same thing as khatwa. Khatwa means a step, and the sabil means a path. All right. So here, وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يُزَكِّي مَن يَشَاءُ. For the Lord Almighty would purify those that actually take the steps of purification. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا. Those that put the effort in the Lord Almighty, He will guide them to His paths. So same thing right there, in where, the other side of this ayah. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يُزَكِّي مَن يَشَاءُ. For the Lord Almighty is the one to actually give that heart purification to He wills. وَاللَّهُ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. And the Lord Almighty is all hearing and all knowing. So we'll stop right there for 5 minutes and we'll come back, inshallah. So let's continue, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And here we are back, inshallah. ولا يأتلي أولو الفضل منكم والسعة أن يؤتوا أولي القربى. There was actually, let's continue the story in where when we were talking about Mistah, remember Mistah actually engaged in that talk, and Mistah, that Sahabi that also participated in the Battle of Badr. So Mistah, because he happens to be the son of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq's aunt, right? So do they even call that cousin? I don't know if they call it a cousin, but anyhow. So basically his aunt, maternal aunt, Mistah happens to be his son. Now Mistah, because he engaged in talking about Sayyidah Aisha, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq actually made an oath that he would not spend on Mistah because he was speaking about his daughter. Now, keep in mind, Mistah was not wealthy. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was. So Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was actually paying and donating to Mistah. But he considered that, wait, I donate for you and you actually go and speak against my daughter? So Mistah made that oath. Now, let's just look really quick in terms of oaths, and there are different kinds of oaths, just that we would put it in the picture. All right, there is what is actually called al-yamin. Maybe I could actually, let me do a whiteboard. It's better, okay? So you could see it right there. We're gonna wipe this little board right there and let's write it right there. So you've got three types of yamin. What is a yamin? A yamin is basically an oath, okay? So basically those oaths. You've got a yamin that is called yamin munaqida. Al-yamin al-munaqida basically means that the person themselves actually made an oath and they really meant that oath. The second type, and al-yamin al-laghu. What is yamin al-laghu? Yamin al-laghu is basically the yamin, an oath that a person might actually do that they don't mean. So in other words, it's just an oral word, kind of very common with Somalis, where everything is wallahi, wallahi. They don't necessarily mean wallahi. Very common within their culture. Yamin al-munaqida, they actually meant the oath. So let's call it an oath that one means and intends. Maybe we should have said intends, okay? The other type of yamin is basically called yamin al-ghamus. Yamin al-ghamus is an oath that one lies about. So it's an oath that contains a lie. Okay, now in the situation of al-yamin al-munaqida, if a person makes a yamin, all right, they make an oath, and then later they regret making that oath, there are three options that they could actually do. The first option is that they could actually, one, really be committed to the oath, and the second option is basically to pay on behalf of that oath an expiation. So that expiation in where? It is to feed or clothe 10 needy people. 10 needy people, okay? Now, the Prophet ﷺ actually said, من حلف على يمين فرأى غيرها خيرا منها فليأتي الذي هو خير وليكفر عن يمينه. Whoever makes an oath, and then they would basically, and this is when the Prophet ﷺ actually said this hadith, when this ayah was revealed. من حلف على يمين فرأى غيرها خيرا منها فليأتي الذي هو خير وليكفر عن يمينه. Whoever makes an oath and then they regret making this oath, فليأتي الذي هو خير, do what is good and pay the expiation for it. What about fasting the 3 days? Fasting the 3 days is only when you cannot afford this. So fasting 3 days when feeding / clothing is not affordable. Okay. Now, yamin al-laghu, as long as you don't have the intention to make yamin, you're just like, wallah mani ja'ana. You're like, I'm not hungry, wallahi, and you don't really mean it. It's just a yamin lahu. There is no expiation, so no expiation for this. Okay. Now, the other type of yamin al-ghamus, scholars had differences of opinions on whether there is they had differences of opinions on whether there is a repentance for it or not. Why? Because it involves people's rights. So you made an oath that you had seen that person take money from that person and you lied about it. That's a yamin ghamus. It's not enough to go whatsoever and feed 10 needy people. Somebody's rights and reputation and who knows all of, or probably even their life was probably at stake. Scholars had differences of opinions on whether there is a repentance or not, but definitely no expiation can be done. You have to fix the problem and fix all the mess that you had caused. Okay, what about that repentance part of it? That differences of opinions between scholars. All right, so this is just in general, so we understand when this ayah was talking about. So here, وَلَا يَأْتَلِ أُولُو الْفَضْلِ مِنْكُمْ, and the best of you, when they actually make an oath, they make an oath. Who was this referring to? Ulul Fadl. Ulul Fadl was actually referring to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. So even when Abu Bakr as-Siddiq had actually done the wrong thing, which is to make an oath that he would not pay for mistah, the ayah said that they should not make an oath. Those that are at the best level should not actually make an oath in not feeding mistah or donating for mistah. Wasa. Wasa means what is actually supposed to be a higher principle is to actually feed the relatives and the poor and those that migrated for the sake of Allah Almighty. And let them وَلْيَعْفُوا وَلْيَصْفَحُوا, and let them يَعْفُوا وَلْيَصْفَحُوا. What's the difference between al-afu and al-safh? Well, there are differences of opinions between scholars in Lugha Arabiyyah, which is even better. Al-afu is to actually forgive the person. Al-afu is to forgive the person, but you still have that transgression that they had committed in your mind. You're still there. It's like, whatever, I'll just let go. I'm not asking for, I guess, any type of a compensation, but I'll just let go. Safh is no. I know you had transgressed this limit, but I'm going to let it pass. You know what? I'm going to even go farther than just forgive you. I'm going to open up like a new page. I'm going to make a new relationship. I'm going to do a safh. It's like opening up a new page. I know you had transgressed the limit with me, but you know what? I'm going to be at peace with you right now. أَلَا تُحِبُّونَ أَن يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ? Would you not want the Lord Almighty to forgive you? So what is that? That's actually referring that the way you relate with others is really the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will relate with you. You relate with others where you're constantly just at their back. The Lord Almighty will also be at your back too. You relate with others that you forgive and you are living at peace. The Lord Almighty will actually forgive you too. Your actions should mimic what you want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be with you. And this is extremely important. Anywhere, don't live according to how people's principles are, but live according to ulul fadl, according to the principles of those that are actually in the highest levels of principles. And that's why he said, وَسَعَةِ أَيُّؤْتُوا. The real principle is not to actually say, I'm not going to give them. But the real principle is to give ulil qurba. Now, here's the ita again. Ita is different than giving, because I have to go to that ayah. Because ita is different than giving in response. And it's kind of very different than equity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ وَإِيتَاءِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى. What is إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ? The Lord Almighty orders for what is, maybe we should go to that ayah. I wonder how fast I can get to it. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ. That the Lord Almighty orders for al-adl. Al-adl is justice. Al-ihsan is a higher level than justice. Al-adl is, Samira, I give you $5, you give me $5. I invite you, you pay for your dish, and I pay for your dish, and you pay for my dish, or at least I pay for my own dish and you pay for your own dish. But al-ihsan is that I'm going to pay for your dish and I'm inviting you. So here, العدل إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان. الإحسان is a higher level. إيتاء ذي القربى is to actually give for your relatives without waiting for something in return. That's al-ita. Just like ita is zakat. You give without waiting for something in return. You take your mother, you take your sister, you support your sister, your brother, whatever it is. Don't brag about it. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually said, وَلَا تُبْطِلُوا صَدَقَاتِكُمْ بِالْمَنِّ وَالْأَذَى. Do not let your donations, we're not talking about monetary donations only, but even ever good service you do, don't cancel it out by man and other, by bragging and harming the person. How do you brag? You brag by reminding them, remember I did this to you. Remember, this is what I did for you. Because when you brag, you cancel out the good service that you did. Why? Because you're actually then showing that the reason why you did that good service was in order to get good service from them. A true believer doesn't do a good service for their relatives or for anyone because they're seeking a good service in response or as a payback. They seek the good service and the reward to be from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not the people. That's the difference. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تُبْطِلُوا صَدَقَاتِكُمْ بِالْمَنِّ وَالْأَذَى. So here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالسَّعَةِ, like the real value is to actually give for the relatives, al-masakin, and for the needy, and for those that actually migrated for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At the end of the day, live to actually forgive, live up to the forgiveness, live up to embracing peace. And why? أَلَا تُحِبُّونَ أَن يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. Look at that. It's basically, now it's changing the type of discourse that it started out with. So here, وَلْيَعْفُوا وَلْيَصْفَحُوا. In English, you can't actually speak in that way, but in Lugha Arabiya, you can. So here, it's basically giving the direct speech, and where it's, in Lugha Arabiya. So here, وَلْيَعْفُوا وَلْيَصْفَحُوا, it's giving this imperative verb. And then it switches the type of discourse. أَلَا تُحِبُّونَ أَن يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. Would you not want the Lord Almighty to forgive you as well? For the Lord Almighty is most forgiving and most merciful. Then it continues. Why? إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَرْمُونَ الْمُحْصَنَاتِ. As for, now this is not necessarily, there is a general qaida. There is a general qaida. Now qaida has nothing to do with the qaida that you guys know of. Qaida actually means a general rule. Let's put this general rule right there. Okay? The general rule in Lugha Arabiya, it's called al-ibra bi'umum al-lafzi la bikhusus al-sabab. La bikhusus al-sabab. What does that mean? So the general theme or the general crux of any ayah is in the generalization of within those terms and not necessarily in the particular reasoning or the particular context this ayah was revealed in. Okay? Al-ibra bi'umum al-lafzi la bikhusus. So the crux of the matter of all those different ayat is not necessarily the reason and the story of why those ayat were revealed, but is actually going to be applied on every single scenario to later come even after those ayat. So it's not only in particular, it's only for that context. So here, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَرْمُونَ الْمُحْصَنَاتِ الْغَافِلَاتِ الْمُؤْمِنَاتِ لُعِنُوا فِي الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ. Those that would accuse the bashful women, the bashful believing women, they're actually going to be cursed. What is illana? Nas'Allah al-afwa wal-afiyah. So illana basically means they will be eschewed, or they will be excelled, or they will be kept away from the mercy of the Lord Almighty. So the mercy of the Lord Almighty would not include them, both in dunya and akhirah. So how are they going to be cursed in dunya? They're going to be cursed where the mercy of the Lord Almighty would not, they might get cancer, never actually even feel nothing but all the pain, or probably feel nothing but absolute evil coming at them in every single direction. لُعِنُوا فِي الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ. The Lord Almighty's mercy will not include them, not in this life and not in the hereafter. وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ. And they would have a great and a magnificent adhab, torments of punishment. Why? يَوْمَ تَشْهَدُ عَلَيْهِمْ أَلْسِنَتُهُم. On that day, their own tongues, their own hands, their own legs would witness all that they were actually doing. On that day, the Lord Almighty would bring back all that they had committed. So dinahum here, all that they had committed, all that they had actually done, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them the justice that they deserve. And they will know that the Lord Almighty is basically the one to give justice and clear justice. Ya Allah, such a scary thing. Al-khabithatu lil-khabithin. For those that are, the word al-khabith actually means contaminated. But this is actually not talking about something that is contaminated per se, but this is actually speaking about it's more of a metaphor, speaking about the people that are living in contamination. They're the ones that are actually deserving the life with, in other words, they were the ones to actually be with those that are contaminated. In other words, a good person does not belong with a good person. Does not belong with a bad person. But a good person, an evil person, belongs with an evil person. And same thing, an evil man deserves nothing but an evil woman like him. And good women deserve good men. And good men deserve good women. And those are the people that will be mubarra'una mimma yaqulun. Those are the people that, despite all the things that people might actually say about the tayyibun, about the good people, despite all the things that people might actually accuse them of, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says they're actually innocent of what others might claim about them. For those are the people that will have forgiveness and wide and generous provisions. Now, in order to protect people's chastity, then the ayat go in. Let's start with what actually preserves people's chastity. Number one, يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تدخلوا بيوت غير بيوتكم. Don't enter homes that are not your homes until and unless حتى تستأنسوا, unless you sense. Now, the word to sense something, in other words, even if they might say ahla wa sahla, you're welcome, but you sense that it looks like the husband and the wife are probably in not their happiest days. So you sense something. In that situation, don't go. Don't go into people's homes when you're not welcome, when they're probably telling you ahla wa sahla, but they don't really mean it. They're probably telling you, yeah, you're welcome, I'm inviting you, but you can sense that they might not actually mean it. Once you enter, وَتُسَلِّمُ عَلَى أَهْلِهَا, once you enter, greet the people that are there. ذَلِكُمْ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ. That's better for you. Why is it better for you? Because it's actually going to be in open arms. It's going to let these people embrace you and you embrace them. What does it actually bring? It brings in hearts together. فَإِن لَمْ تَجِدُوا فِيهَا أَحَدًا فَلَا تَدْخُلُوهَا. If you can't find anybody in that home, well, don't go into people's homes unless you were given the permission to do so. And if you were asked to leave and go back, then go back. It's better for you. It's better. Look at the word azka lakum. Actually goes back to the word azka right there. Where was that word? Azka lakum. Where was it? Zakah. Here we go. So now it takes us back to the same thing. Then huwa azka lakum. If you're asked to leave, just leave. It's better for your heart. It's going to give you that peace in the heart, and it's going to give you that purity in your heart. Allah bima ta'maluna alim, and your Lord Almighty is all aware of what you do. But there is no sin. ليس عليكم جناح أن تدخلوا بيوتا غير مسكونة. What about homes that have no one living in them? Abandoned homes. But you have something in there. It's an abandoned home, but you have something in there. So the Lord Almighty says, well, it's okay for you to enter those homes. And the Lord Almighty knows what you conceal and what you reveal. In other words, don't necessarily hide things. and pretend that there is something in there. If it doesn't belong to you, don't take it. If that home doesn't belong to you, and you know that there's probably someone in there or something, always preserve your sight adab, just like with that dhikr. So what is all that for? That's all in order to preserve the Muslim's chastity. And that's why the ayah then puts it in. قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ. Tell the believing men to lower their gazes and to preserve and guard their private parts. That is azka lahum. That is pure for their heart. The Lord Almighty is aware of what they do. And tell the believing women to lower their gazes and to guard their chastity and guard their private parts. But an extra thing for the women, they should not reveal their beauty. What beauty? Well, إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا, except what reveals. So what does that even mean? Ibn Ata actually explained this, and he actually said there's لَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنْ, they should not reveal the beauty, and he differentiated between the natural beauty and between the acquired beauty. In other words, things that you actually put on yourself. And that's why he said وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنْ, that because the ayah is really clear, they should not reveal their ornaments and their beauty. So the word zinatahun is actually a nakira in Lugha Arabiya, in where it is not defined. In other words, it's not specified. It's actually a very inclusive term to include any type of a beauty, whether that beauty was actually something that you happen to be gifted with by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the nature that He created you in, or whether that is acquired beauty, putting in lenses or putting on eyelashes and foundation and whatever have you to hide those flaws. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, generally, don't reveal your beauty. And put it in, وَلْيَضْرِبْنَ بِخُمُرِهِنَّ عَلَى جُيُوبِهِنَّ, and let them cover with their covering. Now, what is al-khimar? Al-khimar is supposed to be any covering. Now, the covering that basically goes from the top to the bottom. In other words, it's basically a cloak that goes down to cover. It's not tightened against the body, but it's actually darb. Darb to actually mean let it loose. It's not going and trying to tighten around the bosoms or around the breasts or around the necks and around the head, etc. No, it's basically left loose. And the word juyub is basically the breast area. Well, that was because it was a common culture that women, just like today, it was deemed as attractive to actually sew the breast area. Just like today, it was perceived as attractive. And of course, this attraction, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Muslim women that no, you don't belong within this area. So cover your breast area, cover your neck and breast area from and using your khimar, using your head covering, and let it fall loose. And don't reveal any of your beauty except to your husbands, your fathers, and the father actually means your father and your own father, your grandfather, and so forth, or even the fathers of your husbands, that is the father-in-law, or even your children, or even their stepchildren, in other words, your husband's children, or even your brothers, or even your nephews, your brothers' children, in other words, your nephews, or even your sisters, your brother's children, your sister's children, not, okay, I confused it. Your brother's children, in other words, your nephews, your sister's children, in other words, also your nephews, or even the women, or nisa'ihin. Scholars had differences of opinions on whether nisa'ihin actually means believing women or whether it means women in general. أو ما ملكت أيمانهن, or the women that they basically have in order, basically they own them, concubines, أو التابعين, or التابعين غير أولي الإربة, or the men that do not have any lust for women. So whether they had erectile dysfunction or whether they had maybe a mental disorder where they don't understand women, in other words, beauty in place of lust, or etc. أو الطفل الذين لم يظهروا على عورات النساء, or the children that don't understand عورات النساء, don't understand women and their private parts and any of that. In other words, they don't understand lust and etc. And let them not reveal. This is interesting. Look at this one. This is extremely interesting. Why? Because although this is a common practice that was then, so they would actually have anklets with bells on them. And the anklets with bells on them, every time they would strike with their legs on the ground, it would basically, make a bell sound in order to let the men know that there's a passing woman nearby. So they would basically go and probably tease her, whatever it is, basically to get an attraction. So the ayah is basically saying, not only don't reveal your beauty, but not even the sound of your beauty. The sound of beauty, I thought it was supposed to be an appearance, but no, the ayah went farther and said, not even the sound of your beauty should be revealed or be something that is apparent, let alone the appearance of your beauty. وَتُوبُوا إِلَى اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا أَيُّهَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. And then seek repentance, oh you believe, so in order for you to gain success. What is that actually telling us? It's actually telling us to actually embrace the laws of the Lord Almighty, or the principles of the Lord Almighty, is actually what a believer does. It's basically what a person that seeks to be a part of those believers, and that's what's going to give you success. And this is the end of our tafsir. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Of course, you know what, this ayah alone, if I were to actually go in detail, I would probably take 5 hours. But I'm here just summarizing it. Asna, go ahead, my dear.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikha. I have a few confusions, if you could clear them. First, could you explain it again, what's a khumar is?
What's a what?
Khumar.
Khimar. Oh, so khimar is basically supposed to be a head, a covering that covers anything. So there's a general wording and there's a particular wording. The general wording, anything that is khamara, actually means to cover. So that's where the khamr comes in. Okay, the khamr actually means to cover. But did the Sahaba understand, or the Sahabiyat actually understand, that khimar is just a general covering? No, they understood this ayah very clearly, and that's why in Sahih al-Bukhari, the Sahabiyat actually said that Nisa al-Ansar, rahmallah, Nisa al-Ansar, they were not trying to ask about Islam, and even in regards to their matters, and that Sayyidah Aysha actually said that when this ayah was revealed, shaqaqna murutahunna, that they actually cut from, and they just basically tore from the excess of their clothing, the excess of their garments at the bottom, and actually right away covered up their bosoms, and basically covered up with that piece that they actually tore in order to cover up what they were ordered to cover up. So basically this khimar right there is in order to speak of covering all the body. So this khimar, in order to speak of what the word khimar means, it's any covering that covers. But this khimar is actually particular to cover all the body, So this khimar right there, that's why لا يعرفن من الغلس. It was explained that they will not even recognize. So this khimar is not a sheer covering, but this khimar is actually a covering that would actually keep the woman that is wearing it actually not recognized. In other words, she's covered, and differences of opinions between scholars on whether the face is actually part of it or not. So the khimar is any covering, and this is particular for the covering of the garment, the body garment covering. Asna, did I answer that one?
Yes, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Second question is from the ayah number 25th. You said something about dinahum. يومئذ يوفيهم الله دينهم الحق. I didn't
Right.
get that.
So dinahum al-haq, basically, din actually has a number of different meanings. So they were indicted of doing.
Okay.
Right? So what they were indicted of doing, they will basically, with justice, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will hold them accountable for it.
Got it.
Okay, Samira, go ahead, my dear. Let's make it fast because I got to go and drop my mom off at the hospital. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum
Ala nisa'ihinna. Can you elaborate on that, please?
So differences of opinions between scholars on the word nisa'ihinna. Is this actually referring to the believing women, or is this also including non-believing women? And Ibn Hazm actually beautifully goes farther in regards that even lesbian women, we are supposed to be covering in front of them, unlike the majority of the scholars. They regarded that they are women and included in women, so therefore you don't have to cover in front of them. Ibn Hazm regarded that no, you should cover in front of them, and he regarded, and majority of the scholars actually regarded that it is permissible to uncover in front of Muslim women, but not in front of non-Muslim women. Other scholars, they regarded that no, non-Muslim women are included if they are actually considering the bashful part. In other words, they will not describe your beauty and they will not describe your body to other men. So in that situation, they actually included it in front with part of the nisa'ihin. So I'm just giving you those differences of opinions between scholars.
One more question, if I may ask, please.
Mhm.
You said there are 5 levels of zikr: oral, visual, behavioral, audio. What was the 5th?
So I didn't mention the 5th. It's usually like the environment that you put yourself in.
Oh, okay. So your surroundings.
Your surroundings, absolutely. Samira Khan, go ahead. Make it fast, please.
Yes,
Exactly.
Assalamu alaikum. I had a quick question about jilbab and khamar. What would be the difference and what would be the requirement?
So
The
jilbab is usually what covers the lower part of the body, shoulder to down. Khimar would be when you actually cover your head part, but it's actually loose from the head to the rest.
Okay, Jazakallah khair.
وإياكم. Afia, make it fast, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Very quickly about أو الطفل الذين لم يظهروا على عورات النساء. In the classical texts, you could have the age given for 14 or 15. Nowadays, when children as young as 4 and 5 are exposed to nudity, what, in your opinion,
Never
is
in
a
the
good age
classical
to start covering
Never
in front of
no,
children?
Never. Okay, never in the classical text did you actually have an assigned number. It's not an issue of an assigned number. It's when the child is not a child anymore, in where they show signs of puberty. So if they show signs of puberty, whether that boy is, an African descent, you would actually have boys that are 12 years old actually show signs of puberty, versus in Scandinavian countries, they would be 15 and still not showing any signs of puberty. So it depends on the signs of puberty and their physical development and mental development, and not necessarily a number.
So even if they're exposed to nudity, female nudity through media, etc., we still don't need to cover in front
definitely
of them?
need to take that in consideration. You definitely need to take that in consideration and cover in front of them, because of the fact that that their minds were actually contaminated with all of that.
Yeah, understood. Jazakumullah khairan.
All right. وإياكم. So I actually have to leave, everybody. I'm so sorry, but my mom wants me to take her to the hospital. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair, Ustadha.
وإياكم.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. For anyone with further questions, we can keep them. We can keep them for Sheikh Aysha, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.